We'll go ahead and get started. I'll call on the Vice Chair to tell us if we have a quorum. And we have someone sitting in for the Vice Chair today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, we do have a quorum present, and we do have a few alternates
Madam
to
Secretary,
introduce.
Okay, go ahead.
Today with us, we have Mr. Darrell Cockrum, County Judge, Hood County. Alternate for County Judge from Johnson County, Mr. Roger Harmon. Myself, Greg Gessner, Council Member from Grand Prairie. Alternate for Mayor Ron Jensen of Grand Prairie. Moji Haddad, Board Member NTTA. Alternate for Mike Knowles, another Board Member from NTTA. And Mr. George Conley, Commissioner of Parker County, in for County Judge Mark Riley from Parker County. Mr. Chairman, that's the report.
Great, thank you. And we'll call on Commissioner Donnelly to lead us in the pledges. If you would, please stand.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag, allegiance to thee, one state under God, one indivisible.
Thank you very much. Our first item is the consent agenda. If everybody's had an opportunity to review that, I'll entertain a motion. Who was the second? Okay, Sheffy. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move to, Michael, we're going to 2.2, the consent agenda. Consent agenda.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
You're welcome to take any items off of agenda item 2. Staff wishes to take off item 2.3.
2.3. Okay.
We do not need to request those funds. We have already been informed we did not win the national competition on this grant. So 2.3 is deleted. If any other member wishes to pull an item off, we're more than happy to present any of the consent agenda items if you wish. Okay. Otherwise, staff is requesting approval of the consent agenda minus item 2.3.
Okay. Does anyone wish to take anything else off? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the remainder of the consent agenda excluding 2.3. Okay.
Second.
You got Bernice. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 3, orientation director's report.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We have an action component to agenda 3. That is placed there in error. There are no action items in your item 3 agenda. It's just the director's report. The first thing I would like to do is recognize one of your own. Mr. Willis, if you don't mind coming forward, thank you. Former council member from the city of Garland. He, I think, has hit a term limit restriction and couldn't be an elected official from Garland. He served on the Regional Transportation Council 2013 through 2014. The chairman and I have signed recognition of the council member service with sincere appreciation for your very valuable participation in and support for regional transportation planning and development for the North Central Texas metropolitan area. So, Mr. Willis, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
You want to say anything?
Well, I had a bit of an experience coming over here this morning on I-30, so coming through downtown Dallas from Garland. So it's important that this group continue the good work that we've been doing for a long while. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for making me welcome here, for the service that I had. I really appreciate former Mayor Ron Jones for having the confidence to place me on this board before he went off council. And again, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work everybody does, and to mirror what Ron Jones always likes to say, if there's anything I can ever do to help, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. If it's all right, Mr. Chairman, I'll do the first half of my report from here, and then I'll do the remainder up there.
Okay.
I'm not, in the interest of time, I'm only going to cover a few of these. If you go down the director's report to number 3, we do have the letter I showed you from some of our state elected officials with regard to integrating tolled single occupant vehicles onto our existing HOV lanes. So as a result, Amanda and I will go out and have community outreach on that topic. If you look at electronic item 3.2, we're holding 2 town hall meetings, one in the east and one in the west, and inviting citizens of the region and policy officials to come and learn what it is we're doing with those. The 2 specific ones are 635 HOV and US 75 north of LBJ. I think there's a lot of information and new policy officials, and it's always good to go out and communicate what this body is trying to do, so we will do that in electronic item 3.2. There's a newsletter on the Blacklands Corridor. Staff will be recommending to you in the next few months to add that to the transportation plan. We've had lots of public outreach on that particular corridor, so please, if you have the time to review that as we bring you a plan amendment in the future. I think, Bob, in a moment, to turn on this 40th anniversary video, or maybe Brian's going to speak to it. Brian Wilson has the lead on coming up with different events over the course of the year. This is a video that we have, and I think we shared this with you. What we did is went back to the elected officials who have served on the Regional Transportation Council over the last 40 years. So we went to a chairman in each decade. So Judge Noah, municipal judge in Richardson, former mayor of Richardson, former DART board member, first RTC chairman. He talks about the challenges in the first 10 years. Tarrant County Commissioner Bob Hampton talks about the second decade of the RTC. Commissioner Jackson from the Dallas County Commissioners Court, State Rep Jackson, talks about the third decade of the RTC. And Judge Whitley, who is out of town today, who's currently on the Regional Transportation Council, talks about our fourth decade. This is a staff-generated video asking them questions. They all came from the staff. It's pretty nice to hear the views, and it's pretty nice for former and existing chairpersons to reflect on activities over the last 40 years. So I will stop there and turn it over, and we'll see the video. So Brian, we turn the agenda over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Without further ado, I'll just double click here.
40 years ago, 2.6 million people called the Dallas-Fort Worth region home. Fast forward, and the region currently has over 6.5 million residents. In 1974, the North Central Texas Council of Governments was designated as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Dallas-Fort Worth region. Shortly after, the Regional Transportation Council was developed to make decisions on the future of transportation in North Texas.
It was a complicated puzzle, but it's one that, again, through the collaboration with all of the folks in the region, all the folks on the RTC, working together, I think we were able to accomplish.
I think it had an impact in that, as I say, it put us in a better competitive position with the rest of the state, because we are competing for money. And so it gave us more voice, a larger voice, in competing for that money.
Done a pretty good job, or a very good job of joining the 16 counties into one region, into a regional planning system.
How do we allocate resources, money, in the region for the development of the moving of goods, service, and people?
As we came into the 21st century, as we came into the year 2000 and forward, what we found is not only did we have big issues with clean air in the region being a non-attainment area, but also we became more and more aware of the funding problems that we were going to have at the state and at the federal level.
Transportation patterns may change, and if I were just envisioning the most probably outlandish thoughts for today, but may not be outlandish tomorrow. I could see communities formed around work centers where people walk to their work center and maybe even working for different organizations or different companies. They came together at the same place for the work period, which could, and this may sound crazy, but it could completely change the way we view transportation.
It's easier to look back than it is to look forward, but I will try to tell you what I envision, that we will have the high-speed rail to Houston. And I think that we'll probably have driverless cars in 40 years.
I think the challenge is, as I mentioned earlier, that as people move here, we got to keep them moving here. And I believe that the way we do that is thus far, when we've looked at moving folks, we've primarily focused on highways. And I think that in the future, that as we begin to look at how we're going to move people around the Metroplex, that we're going to have to broaden that out and begin looking at transit and other forms of transportation. And just as importantly, I think we've got to focus on trying to find a way to allow people to live, to work, to play within the same area, and them not have to drive 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour to get to where they work or where they go to church or where they play.
We can't go off and leave it untended. What we've got's got to be kept or modified, and where we go has got to meet the challenge of the technology and capabilities of tomorrow. And I think this region can do it. In fact, it's doing it every day.
We've come a long way in the last 40 years. North Texas has the longest light rail network in the country. Rural areas are easily accessible from busier roads and highways, and air quality problems are being closely monitored to ensure residents can breathe clean air. Even though ozone pollution levels are higher than designated by the Environmental Protection Agency, the Regional Transportation Council is dedicated to making decisions that impact air quality in a positive way. The North Texas region doesn't plan on slowing down, so the Regional Transportation Council will be busy preparing for significant growth and additional transportation needs while addressing environmental concerns that materialize along the way.
Brian, thank you very much. So we'll continue to celebrate our 40th anniversary over the course of the year, and you saw from the, I think it was 6th graders or 4th graders last time, to junior high people today. No, I'm kidding. To our senior leaders today. It's a nice transition, Brian. Thank you very much. I do have on our agenda to congratulate Dallas Area Rapid Transit and DFW International Airport. So to the DART board and to the DFW Airport board and Gary Thomas, congratulations. You have a very major element coming up and a lot of hard work by a lot of people to get that done. So congratulations to you all. And we look forward to the Fort Worth Transportation Authority coming into that same AB station in the next few years and hooking up those two train systems at the airport, so congratulations. The last item to just simply flag is we blue sheeted events coming up with the Texas Transportation Commission. Their meeting is in Dallas. They've had a recent meeting in the Fort Worth region. The High Speed Rail Commission for this region will meet Wednesday, August 27th. And as you know, Judge Von Hill and Judge Whitley are on that commission. They meet from 9 to 11:30. There's a reception, luncheon type event being put together. We'll get you more details with regard to that as commissioners want to hear from people within the region. The commission has asked for a workshop and a presentation from the Regional Transportation Council. So Amanda is coordinating who's available Wednesday. And I think we have something like 20 or 30 minute of presentation, and then a dialogue with the commission on the multimodal projects that we're doing within the region. And several of you have been asked to help put that together. So that presentation is being worked on, and Chair Cantrell will lead the RTC through that discussion. And then the commission meeting is the next day from 9 o'clock. We've been asked to attend because lots of items the commission wants us to respond to, but we don't have any formal presentations at this time. So please look at that, and we'll continue to give you details. The commission travels a lot more than it used to, so I think we're going to see more of the commission as it moves around the state as part of that exercise. And Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there and take any questions anyone has.
Michael, yesterday I got an email that mentioned that the Fort Worth Transportation Authority had been mentioned in a article in the Dallas Observer. So immediately turned to it and started reading through it. And first of all, I have to admire your choice in automobiles. I did have a Volvo one time. It didn't run really well, and you do have really nice grass in front of your house. I don't know how you do it. I've been trying to grow St. Augustine my whole life and have never had that much success. But there was an article, a mention in there about our bus service breaking down and having to stop and start multiple times. Just want to assure you that's not true. If we've checked our records, we can't find anywhere that it happened. If something like that would have happened, we would have had a service vehicle out there immediately and another bus. So I think you have to take that article with a little grain of salt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I could just comment, two things that are kind of funny about that article. It paints me as sort of a highway person and not very supportive of transit. And most places I go, people accuse me of being too supportive of transit and not supportive enough of highway. So I found that kind of funny. You know, here is a person in an RTC who helped resolve the South Oak Cliff DART issue with the city of Dallas back in 1980s with intersection improvements so we could get that light rail to construction. You know, we have technical tools to help the trees on the new START applications. Most of the money that built the Trinity Railway Express came from the Regional Transportation Council. Tom and his team, working closely with Gary and the city of Dallas, with support from the feds, are building a streetcar project. The RTC is funding extensions of that streetcar project. You have over $100 million in the Tex rail line going from Fort Worth to the airport. You work with Denton County Commissioners Court in flexing RTR funds to build the A train in the Denton County area, so that train will be up and running previous to the Interstate 35E going under construction. We had interesting work with Irving on getting the light rail line to Las Colinas and making sure all those commitments were made so the train could open up on time, getting a rail vehicle manufacturing plant here in the region, which is a dream coming closer and closer. Your funding of positive train control. So for an individual in a group who doesn't support transit, it's somewhat comical. But I did get a lot of comments on the grass with the number of trees, so I got more on that. So if anyone, I do pride myself on the weekend working on the yard. I thought the yard looked really nice in the pictures. I do have a lot of trees. That's why my wife and I and daughter haven't left that house. So if you do want any additional information on St. Augustine in the shade, I'll be happy to. More of you are interested in that, as the chairman is. So, but thank you for that recognition of the lawn. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, we'll move to item number 4, Transportation Development Credits Revolver Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a more serious subject, you do have in your packet electronic item 4.2, and you have a resolution in 4.3. So we will ask you to approve the resolution in item 4.3. But let me walk you through the presentation. If someone could put my slides up for me. Ms. Jessie, thank you. Now, Jessie is speaking later today, and she always integrates some humor from before her presentation into her presentation. So I'm interested in where she's heading.
It's too much pressure.
let me walk you through. The Commission has already approved this, and if this is something you wish to do, we need your support today. Transportation development credits, as you know, are not real cash dollars. They are credits that the federal government permits you to use in order to meet match requirements or in-kind match requirements on federal projects. You have 465 million credits from the construction of toll roads on what are designated national and statewide facilities. Again, these aren't cash, but do help us match projects with regard to federal funding. If you go to the next page, this is what you've approved, and here's a status report on where you are. You've allocated credits in 5 categories. 5 million credits to help small transit agencies pay for their improvements with 100% federal funds and use the credits for match. So far, we've used about 2 of the 5 million. In the second category, where the RTC has funds, 1 to 2 million used in Transportation Alternatives Program. This is Carla's program. That call is out right now, and some of those credits are preserved for components of that. You haven't made those decisions yet, so those credits are still sitting there. And 7.6 million of credits went to help on the congestion and air quality programs earlier this year. In your consent agenda, item 2.2, you approved 16.76 million credits for DART in the city of Carrollton. So not all of those credits were used. Today, we're asking you in this item to approve $100 million worth of credits. You had set aside $150 million to be used for this $10 million cash contribution to be a financial revolver. Under federal law, as you know, you have to first pay your bill and then you seek reimbursement. This body needs some revenue source to pay the bill so the federal government can then reimburse that. It's called a revolver because the fund will always have $10 million in it. The funds will never be used to do anything other than to simply pay the invoices and to seek federal reimbursement. If you're in the city of Dallas and you have federal money to time traffic signals, the city of Dallas is first paying that bill with local funds, and then they seek reimbursement from the federal government to reimburse them for those costs. Our agency has no taxing authority. We in transportation have outgrown what small amount the agency has in a reserve fund, so this is a way to seek the RTC its own reserve fund in order to be reimbursed for these federal projects. You also gave us flexibility for $10 million on regional programs, of which $5 million has been used. So we are asking to use these $100 million with TxDOT. You'll see in a moment we're not going to try to sell these to the other MPOs. I don't think there's any market for that right now. And we have been working with TxDOT for some time to get their particular approval, and they have gone to their commission to give us $10 million. And the way this would work is it's very similar to how you created RTC Local. Some project will come from our region, which has 80% federal from the RTC, 20% local. That local money that comes in, the state will send back to us and pay that local money with state money. So the reserve fund that we have will actually be an aggregation of local funds from our region, where the state will opt to pay the local cost with state money, and over time, it won't happen in one. We won't get a check for $10 million. We'll get a check over several projects that eventually will sum up to the $10 million mark. So if we turn to the next page, we briefed you on this last month. There is this funding exchange that will occur for this to be accomplished. And then the specific recommendation for you today is on this last page. Go ahead and transfer $100 million of transportation development credits if you approve the resolution in exchange for $10 million in cash that will sit in an account that can be audited at any time. And 20 years from now, it'll have a value of $10 million in cash, I guess, plus interest that's in that particular account. This revolver will help us pay the cash flow for any projects you wish to implement, have it be van pool programs or signal progression or whatever else you asked the RTC to do. We do want to return the $33 million that's unused from the second call and put that back into our bank account. We will think what's the best way to use credits in the future. We're not asking you to take approval today on that, so let's put those funds back into the pot. We're going to ask you to take the $50 million that we were going to sell to the MPOs, put that back into the pot, give us time to rethink what's the best way to do that, and with your approval, this would affect all the documents where we keep track of transportation development credits in the Transportation Improvement Program. Your total sum, I summed them up this morning. You had $465 million with all the expenses to date, assuming all the other categories will fully be spent. Your bank will still have $326 million worth of credits, and there are other projects being built which will add credits to this in the future. So I don't think you're at much risk of not being able to have unintended consequences of doing something else. In fact, we'll be challenged to find innovative ways to go spend $326 million in credits. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there and see what questions members have on this item.
Any questions? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Who was the second? Okay. Mayor. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 5, environmental speed limit transportation control measure substitution. Chris Klaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The good news is I can report I think you'll see at the conclusion of my information is that we're heading close to the conclusion of this effort that we've been working on for some time. Environmental speed limits, as you know, has been in place since early as 2001, where we were working on strategies to come up with emission reductions to be able to put into subsequent state implementation plans or the clean air plans for our region. Since that time, here's just a snapshot of what that motivation was from. Previous generations of our computer models suggested that speeds greater than, say, 35, 40 miles an hour got some pretty decent reductions or increases as you continue to go faster. So we worked with the engineers and TxDOT, and it was determined that a 5-mile-an-hour reduction from 70 to 65, 65 to 60s wouldn't have been compromising safety, and we can implement, post new speed limit signs, and then commit to EPA that the benefits by implementing such a strategy. The new generations of models are suggesting something different. They're suggesting that because of vehicle technologies and efficiencies of engines on vehicles, that beyond this time frame or the speed of 35, 40 miles an hour, you're really not getting a whole lot of benefit anymore. So, it's, I think, in the best interest, and we're thinking that why subject the traveling public to speed limits that are in place for the wrong reason. So this is where we've been working for some time. We have a working group that consists of our federal and state partners, along with yourself, and I'll summarize that in a second, to reverse what we put into place back in 2001. So as the title of the slide suggests, that I'm not going to present to you what the speed limits may ultimately be when they're able to be changed. This is simply a reverse analysis. We're just going to take our models. We've taken our models and we've taken those that were reduced to 65 and put them back to 70. We took those that were reduced to 60 and put them to 65. And we've quantified the analysis or the benefits or the impacts. And then you earlier this year came up with some funding mechanism to be able to assist in coming up with those offsets. So one of the things I want, at least to recognize, that EPA did recognize our interest in this, and they did set in motion, along with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to allow a process to be able to do this substitution. The way it was originally categorized in the air quality plan, it would have been a much more, I think this has been onerous. It would have been even much more onerous than what we've been facing with the substitution approach. So just as a visual from the standpoint of the blue and the red lines were all those facilities that were changed back in 2001 when the speed limits were reduced by 5 miles an hour. Earlier this year, in order to assist or a piece of the puzzle, you funded and authorized a partnership program between yourself and TxDOT to be able to fund a bunch of projects, put money towards a bunch of congestion mitigation and air quality projects that would be implemented in the core or the central urban area, and in that central urban area by reduction of congestion and benefit of air quality. We would then be able to use those benefits inside the green area to be able to overturn any offsets that or impacts that would have come about by increasing speed limits in the rest of the region. So what were those things back in earlier this year? There was a bunch of initiatives, truck lane restrictions, a bunch of signal progression projects were funded, expansion of the ITS program, and a good amount of intersection improvements throughout within that green particular area. So the mechanism that EPA allowed us to do is to simply identify what is the impact on reversing a particular strategy, and then so long as we come up with a substitute strategy that has more or equal to emission reductions, then we can go through a process to substitute. So what we've done on the left-hand side, this is this reverse analysis where when we put all the speed limits back to the way they were, it was an increase in 0.48 tons per day of nitrogen oxides, one of the precursors to ozone. Volatile organic compounds I don't have here because it actually did assist in reducing VOC, so that's not necessarily part of the discussion. So we're having to offset the 0.48 tons per day. So on the right-hand side, that's basically the list of initiatives from the previous page that were funded earlier this year. There's a large scope of benefits, and now that we knew that it was a half a ton of reduction that would be needed, we're actually pulling out 0.48 tons from the previous list of strategies to be able to offer or commit to the EPA that we would put in the clean air plan to be able to substitute out and remove the environmental speed limits. So what staff did is we did a little bit of some analysis internally, and we've come to at least a conclusion that approximately 293 locations of signalization projects would get us the 0.48 tons of reduction that we could substitute in for the increase in the modest increase in speed limit environmental speed limit removal. So this basically, in a nutshell, would be your action that I'll be seeking here in a moment. As I mentioned, the timeline, we're pretty close to the end, or to the point where TxDOT will be able to go back to business as usual and set and establish speed limits based on general engineering principles like the old days on these particular facilities. So depending on your action today, this will allow us to wrap up all of our pieces of the puzzle with our partners, of which then again clearing the way for TxDOT to be able to start modifying speed limits based on engineering principles and safety considerations starting in November later this year. So I have in your packet reference item 5.1, which is a resolution that we would love for your consideration so that we could forward to our partners. There's 4 sections in that on the second page. Section 1 says, in accordance with EPA approved Dallas-Fort Worth environmental speed limit control strategy conversion to a transportation control measure SIP, the RTC approves substitution of approximately 293 traffic signalization projects and their air quality benefits to offset the emission reduction credits lost by reversing environmental speed limits implemented in 2001. Second section reads, in accordance with the Clean Air Act, the substitute control measure changes account for equivalent or greater amount of emission reductions that the transportation control measure to be replaced and are in the time frame established for the SIP. Third section is the resolution will be transmitted to the Substitution Working Group, which comprises of Federal Highway, EPA, TxDOT, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And the fourth section would be the resolution shall be in effect immediately upon its adoption. So, Mr. Chairman, that's conclusion of this particular subject, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any questions? I don't see any lights. Danny, was that you? Okay. And who did the second? Second, Rod? Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 6, Texas Transportation Commission follow-up on SH 360 and Regional Tolling Services Agreement. Michael?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. With regard to the principles that are in reference item 6, the Commission has gone ahead with both State Highway 360 and at one time some concern that 183 may be held up. That never happened. So those transportation projects have moved forward because the Commission has seen progress with regard to the toll services agreement. NTTA and TxDOT asked us to put this on the agenda, even though this is an agreement between NTTA and TxDOT. This agreement basically is how NTTA will collect tolls on managed lanes and how NTTA will send that money to TxDOT. This is a major deal. This is a major breakthrough. What is occurring here is Jerry Kerrigan and the NTTA board and John Barton and the Texas Transportation Commission is saying to each other, we are going to look at each other and trust each other in what it is we're going to do. It is similar, in my opinion, to how the Regional Transportation Council works directly with the districts. We don't have lengthy agreements when we do things like we just did on speed limits, when other institutions would spend lots of time on agreements with regard to that last item, because we trust each other. If there's a problem, then we bring it back to you, and you tell us what it is you wish to do. So I really want to compliment John Barton and Jerry Kerrigan with regard to this. We're not going to wordsmith these agreements to think of every possible consequence. We're going to trust each other and have more basic, straightforward agreements. These set of principles, which we all worked on, were sent to the Commission, Texas Transportation Commission, last month. That permitted them to let the transportation projects go because there's enough progress being made. Brian Barth, who's here today, Bill Hale, who's here today, Elizabeth Mao, who's here today, Ken Kirkpatrick, who is on vacation from our staff, worked on these agreements with Tom Bamani from NTTA and hammered out the agreements, which are more straightforward and not lengthy, complicated items. I won't go through these principles, but these principles set in place the detailed agreements, and it basically says NTTA and TxDOT are going to be partners, and NTTA is not having any profits when they collect tolls, and the allocation of costs to TxDOT for collecting tolls is just going to simply be prorated across how they do tolls for their own system, and TxDOT can audit at any time. We're all going to work on getting more people to have toll tags than to read the plates, which is a much more labor cost situation and much more costly for the traveling public. So both of those entities asked, even though we're not a signator, could you go to the Regional Transportation Council, make sure they're aware of this, have them approve this approach, because each of the two entities, NTTA has on their agenda this month, the Commission has on their agenda this month at the August meeting here in Dallas, to basically put in place not just the success of a toll services agreement, but a whole new way of doing business that will be much more straightforward. If you reflect on how long it took us to get the 360 agreement and how many times we almost lost it, and as we move forward on other things that NTTA and TxDOT will do, I really think this is a big deal. I think it shows the maturing of the agencies and is a much more efficient way for governments to work, and we spend less. I know this room is full of attorneys, but the two agencies will be spending less of their money on legal fees and more of their money on actually delivering the transportation that we're asking them to do. So I will stop there. I didn't spend a lot of time on the toll services agreement. I did spend some time on these principles and making sure that these are good government policy initiatives. But Brian and Bill and Elizabeth are here if you have any details. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there and take any questions anyone has.
Okay. Ms. Washington?
Yes, thank you, Sir Chair. I guess the question would be, there's a lot of discussion about the number of toll roads we're having, and some roads that weren't toll roads are being converted to toll roads. So who make that decision? Is it NTTA and TxDOT?
You decide what roadways will be tolled and what roadways won't. None of the roadways can be converted. You have a policy that's 20 years old. We're not taking any free lanes and making them toll lanes. And since that time, the state legislature has adopted your position. But this body decides what projects need to be tolled and which ones don't. And then you assign that either to NTTA to, would you consider building this as a toll road? They can say yes or no. Or with regard to a toll managed lane, we need to ask NTTA to waive primacy. They usually do for a toll managed lane, or always have, and then TxDOT will build a toll managed lane.
Okay, now, because it was my understanding there was some discussion about a part of 75 becoming toll, so is anything new that we build onto 75 that would be considered toll?
Yeah, that's the meeting we're going to have, hopefully with elected officials, where because the HOV lanes, not the lanes that are out there, the lanes that are out there stay gas tax supported. But since the HOV lane is underutilized, can we let single occupant users into the HOV lane? And to help manage it, could we use a toll to help manage that particular situation? And it's just simply a temporary situation because we don't have the money to turn it into an LBJ or a DFW connector or a North Tarrant Express. And we're not going to do that to the reversible on I-30. That'd be too confusing. I don't think we need to do it on South Earl Thornton because we're close to getting the Southern Gateway funded. We do need it, staff feels we need to do it on LBJ because it feeds the new 635 managed lane, and we need to do it on 75 because it feeds the new 635 managed lane. So we came to you and said, could we introduce a toll on those two HOV lanes as an interim measure to help increase the effectiveness of those HOV lanes as part of that process?
And that would fall on the auspices of what we are approving now?
Well, no, what you're approving now is whatever's told within the, in fact, those two projects wouldn't fall under this particular agreement because this particular agreement is only for the official, what we call the orange lines. These would be the toll services from toll managed lanes. This would be 35E. This would be the DFW connector. The new Interstate 30 from Fort Worth to Arlington would be included in that. You wouldn't have to go back and get one in every individual project. 183 in Irving would be part of that. Any future toll managed lane in the particular project. We'll have to bring you back what it is we're doing on the LBJ and 75 after we go back out to public meeting and hold meetings with elected officials.
I thought you were fixing to announce that you were going to take the toll off International Parkway.
That's going to happen in our lifetime.
Ms. Wildman?
Well, Michael, I just wanted to say congratulations to TxDOT and NTTA. We're so looking forward to this 360 project that, you know, I want to congratulate them, but I'll tell you the congratulations will come when we kick the dirt and get the road going. But with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay. So I have a motion and a second right here, and we have further discussion. Duncan, is that you?
I guess I'm appreciative of this being an item that's put in our packet. I'm concerned of why we're approving it if we're not a signatory.
That was my first.
And what is the ramifications for us approving it if we're not a signatory?
Okay, very good question. That was my first reaction, and you notice I didn't give you a copy of the actual legal agreement because it would give the impression you're somehow signing on to the details. What I thought was important is to include the principles. So I believe, you know, we were asked to go to the original meeting. We were asked to bring the influence of the RTC to, do you want an NTTA and TxDOT to have a stronger partnership based on trust? We've been pushing for this for some time with regard to it. I think you should approve the principles, not approve the legal agreement since you're not a signature. That's the distinction I would make. But I would also say as part of the action that you as an RTC are sending a policy statement because these are your implementing agencies, NTTA and TxDOT, that you wish them to work in a more trusted fashion, and then if something happens, they work it out in a typical, if we have a cost overrun on a job, I come here and say the job cost $1.2 million more, you want to pay for that, or the project came in under. We don't spend 6 months on an agreement working out every possible thing with regard to what may happen on a particular job. So the reason I didn't give you the detailed legal agreement is you're not a signator, but I believe NTTA and TxDOT are doing this largely with some previous concerns by the RTC that certain things were taking too long, and several of you had concerns that the Commission was now holding up 360 because they were upset that NTTA hadn't signed their toll services agreement. So I think there is RTC business here, and they've come up with a position, I think a good government position in moving forward, and I think you as policy officials should be asked to weigh in on, do you wish to accept a hair more risk for the two agencies' benefit of working together and moving forward? And that, I think, is the spirit of the action that we're asking you to take.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is clarification. The HOV lanes as they exist today, they are classified as free lanes? Are they a proxy toll if you're a single driver, free if you're two or more?
All the existing HOV lanes are all temporary. They all were intended to be gone by now, where we reconstruct we shoehorned in an HOV lane for the purposes of a temporary improvement to gain some air quality benefit, with the expectation that we would have totally rebuilt the freeway by now and had, if you wished, express lanes in the middle that would be tolled managed lanes for both auto occupancy considerations as well as toll. We're 4 behind. US 75 north of LBJ, 635 east of Central, Interstate 30 east out of downtown, and Interstate 35 east south of downtown. The two that we're asking for improvement on, that we're going to take to the public, and Bill's in the middle of environmental on them, and has nothing to do with this particular agreement, is to be more cost effective by letting single occupant users, if they wish, to get into the HOV lane, but they have to pay a toll to do so as an interim measure until we can get environmental clearance on the LBJ and the US 75 project.
So can it be said that if we were to take this action at some point, it became a tolled lane for any number of riders or drivers, that we've taken a free lane and converted it to a toll lane?
I don't believe so, because that HOV lane was a shoulder of a roadway. We took the shoulder away and introduced it as an HOV lane. HOV lane users can still get on it. Single occupant users can't. It's not as cost effective as we'd all like it to be. So let's let, at their option, their ability to travel in that lane, but to make sure it doesn't get overwhelmed, you have to introduce some sort of pricing mechanism or toll into that particular lane. And in the future, you'd like that lane to be not a shoe, a very tight temporary lane. You'd like it to be a permanent lane that has both HOV users on it and toll express users on it, just like what's being built in the middle of LBJ, the DFW connector, and the North Tarrant Express.
Thank you.
Ms. Grace?
Michael, what is that little bit of risk you were talking about when you answered Mr. Webb?
Well, as you know now, what lawyers do is they think of every possible combination of events, including, I hate to tell you, I've been in meetings, well, what happens if there's a nuclear event? Who's going to pay? And I've literally said in meetings, I think if there's a nuclear explosion, who gets paid first is the least of our problems. I've had to say that, but attorneys are trained, rightfully so, to think of every particular consequence. So instead of
And that's not a little bit of risk, but.
instead of thinking of every possible consequence, you simply say, and I'm overstating the position, if we collect money for TxDOT, once we get paid at the NTTA, we will turn over that money to TxDOT. And then typically what they would have is, what if you don't turn it over? What do we do? And then we go down this whole path of, okay, well, can you sue me? No, you can't sue me because of X. And then we spend all that time, I think, on tangents. So we'll be happy to have a conversation if NTTA elects not to pay TxDOT on the DFW connector, because I don't think that's going to be happening. But a lawyer would say there's some risk that they may not pay him, as an example, or there may be a nuclear accident, and most of us are saying, why don't we cross that bridge when we get to it, because most of us think that that's not likely, that NTTA would collect money and for some reason not pay them.
Thank you.
That would be an example.
Commissioner, is that you again?
Yes.
Go ahead.
As
I
a good
wanna
lawyer,
make sure-
yes, sir.
Yes, I mean, I guess I want to clarify again, given some of the questions that have been raised during this item, I don't see anything in this statement of principles between TxDOT and NTTA that has anything, a position or otherwise, on tolling interim or permanent.
Somehow the interim and well, you see here, regional TSA does not include existing TSAs with regard to that. So what this is for all toll services agreement that affect the new generation of toll managed lanes.
Right, but it doesn't.
So it doesn't affect LBJ, in my opinion, and US 75, because that's not the new generation of toll managed lane. We'll
But
have
it
to,
also is not identifying where those are going to be.
no.
anywhere in the stuff.
What it does say is if there are those in the future, we don't have to create a new toll. If the RTC wishes to have another one, this agreement will affect it because they're all going to be treated the same.
Right.
But it doesn't prescribe where they're going to be, nor does it lock in the RTC or them into them. It's just that we don't have to come up with another agreement.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's clear.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Amanda, you're going to give us the item number 7, legislative update and committee testimony.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I do have several updates on both the federal and state legislative sides. This is in your agenda as an action item. That will be related to some items on Proposition 1 that we've talked to you about before that's on the ballot for this November. All right, so I'll start on the federal side. We do have somewhat of good news to report. Back in July, before Congress went on recess, they were able to come to agreement on an extension to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent and to extend MAP 21 through May 31st of next year. So that's really, really good news, because if they had not passed this bill, the USDOT would have had to delay reimbursements back to states on transportation projects. What this does is it makes $10.8 billion in transfers from the general fund over to the Highway Trust Fund. So what this probably did was make any action on passing a long-term reauthorization bill to replace MAP 21 very unlikely for this current year. So I think we'd be looking at sometime in the first part of next year. Although getting something done between January and May is probably it's going to be really tight for Congress to get a new bill done and funded and approved by then. So we may be looking at another extension past May. It is probable, but I think this is definitely good news that we can continue transportation projects through next year. Congress is in recess through September 8th. When they get back, they will have to deal with appropriations for the next fiscal year, which would be due by September 30th. The House and Senate, the House has approved a bill on the transportation side. The Senate committee has approved a bill. They are pretty far apart in funding differences. The House would be $700 million for transportation below the current fiscal year appropriations amount, and the Senate would be $500 million above the current amount, so there's a pretty big difference there. The other big thing that they have a difference on is the Tiger funding. Those are those special discretionary funds. So we'll see how that plays out in the month of September, but they will not have very many legislative days to get that done. So we'll be looking for that extension or a full appropriations bill to be passed. So I'll move over to the state legislative update. I'll cover 3 items. The first, I'll stay on this slide, which is that first bullet point. On August 5th, the Texas House Select Committee on Transportation Funding, Expenditures, and Finance held a meeting, and Joe Pickett from El Paso is the chairman of this committee. The day before, there had been a working group related to a project selection that Michael is a member of, and Chairman Pickett had asked Michael to stay over and testify at this committee hearing. We did send you out 2 emails related to this. One was just a summary of the principles that Michael had covered on behalf of that working group, and then the second email, we provided you a link to the video if you'd like to view it. Really, Michael talked about 6 principles to the project selection, formula allocation of projects, a bottom-up project selection process, that projects should come from MPO, broad-based approach using a lot of public involvement and involving TxDOT and all the other agencies. The regions should lead the project selection process within their MPO regions. And then if all of these items were to be put in place, TxDOT could be given greater flexibility with operating procedures, such as maybe the legislature wouldn't have to authorize each individual CDA project if the legislature felt comfortable that the project selection process was very grassroots based. And then this could create a greater focus on transportation system and creating opportunities for leveraging and other statewide benefits. So if you have any questions on that, I think Michael would be probably happy to answer any questions about that process and that testimony that he gave. We just wanted to bring a summary back in case anyone hadn't been able to view the video. So I'll move on to the draft RTC legislative program. As you know, we'll be starting a new session in January. The RTC typically develops a legislative program, and we do it in 3 parts. A program to actively pursue. So these are really the bigger items that really need the attention and focus and of all the elected officials. We have a longer list of items to support that may or may not come up in the session, but we want to make sure that you're on record on those if there are bills that are passed on those. And then items to monitor. A lot of that is flexibilities that have been previously given by the legislature to make sure that there's nothing done to go back on any of the flexibilities that we have. So we didn't have a full draft ready to put in your packet and present to you today, but we wanted to provide you our early thinking at least on those big actively pursue items. So I've listed them here. The first would be to retain limited authority for TxDOT to enter into public-private partnerships on specific projects. These are the CDA projects I just mentioned. They put specific timelines in this as the legislature authorizes a small list of projects each year. So these would be projects that would be ready to go within the next 2 to 3 years. They have very strict timelines on getting the environmental process, going to letting, going to contracts, and so forth. So some of the ones we are thinking about would be 635 East, that project that Michael was just talking about. A couple of segments still of the North Tarrant Express require some additional authority. One of the ones we've heard, possibly Trinity Parkway, we know that's an NTTA project, but if, they were not looking to do that or they wanted to ask the RTC to look into that, that could be a possibility. And then if there's any projects out there that have been approved in previous legislative sessions that may not have hit their environmental or their contracting targets, and just extend that authority. The second bullet there, support full funding for the AirCheck Texas program. As you know, the last 2 legislative sessions, this has been cut by about 87.5%. We're hearing that the TCEQ will ask to continue that 87.5% cut into the next legislative session. I think we heard that there's something around a $200 million buildup of funds that could be used for this program that are just being held back. So we'll be looking at different options there. The third would be identify additional transportation revenue. This would just be general. We've heard a couple of proposals out there utilizing the motor vehicle sales tax that currently goes to the general fund, transferring that either all at once or over time over to the state highway fund. Another thing that came out was the Speaker of the House specifically talked about ending diversions. So those are two items that could go on your legislative program. And then we still don't know if there could be anything related to high-speed rail. As Michael noted, the High-Speed Rail Commission will be meeting here in the region in a couple weeks. So if there are items that they identify that could be early actions that would need legislative support, we may want to support those. So we'd also, just like to hear from you of how you'd like to have a discussion on the rest of the legislative program, if that's, at an information item next month, or if you'd like to have a workshop upcoming. So we can talk about that once I get through the presentation. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the action that we're seeking today. This is related to Proposition 1 that will be on the ballot in November. We brought you a specific item on this proposition back in March, and you did pass a position statement supporting Proposition 1, which, just as a reminder, this is it would deposit half of the oil and gas production tax revenue that would normally be destined for the rainy day fund. It's not taking money out of the rainy day fund. It would be moving funds to the state highway fund before it got to the rainy day fund, should the legislature determine that they have enough money in the rainy day fund to make that transfer. So again, you passed a position statement back in March. We were asked specifically by one of these statewide supportive entities, the Transportation Infrastructure Now, if the RTC would sort of sign on, since you have a position of support, as a supporting entity. So we thought we'd look at what other organizations are supporting the proposition, and there are two other ones, Move Texas Forward and the Texas Transportation Alliance. I have a little bit of information about each of these. Texas Infrastructure Now was started by the Texas Good Roads and Transportation Association. There are several entities already in the region who are active in this, TRTC, DRMC, many chambers of commerce, some cities, and some of you have already signed on as supporters of this group. Move Texas Forward was started by former Texas Transportation Commission Chair Deirdre DeLisi, and also additional members Ned Holmes and Bill Meadows are board members there. They're really looking at civic and business groups to try to help educate the general public about transportation infrastructure funding needs. And the third group is the Texas Transportation Alliance, and this was formed by Jerry Thompson from our region and Walter Michener from the Houston region. It's more of a business, high-level business-oriented group, but we thought we would bring to you all of these organizations that are looking at support for Proposition 1. I think many of them will go on to support additional transportation funding in the next legislature and beyond, but we're specifically bringing this joining on to these groups in their support of Proposition 1. So with that, just a brief schedule. We would, of course, bring back an RTC legislative program for action probably in the November timeframe, and then the legislature does begin in January. And so our action today would be to request to add the Regional Transportation Council to the list of entities in support of Proposition 1 with the three organizations listed, Transportation Infrastructure Now, Move Texas Forward, and Texas Transportation Alliance. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, I wanted on the draft of the RTC legislative program, under the bullet point, support full funding of AirCheck Texas. There was some discussion about expansion of LIP LIRAP uses. Is that part of that bullet point, or does that need to be a separate item? Because I look at those as two different things.
No, that's an excellent observation. I think the strategy that we have, and Amanda plans on bringing this back to you next month in detail, is right now the Republicans, when you talk to them in the legislature, don't like the AirCheck Texas program because we don't necessarily need to repair and replace all these particular vehicles. The Democrats, like it because It's good for air quality, and it's often the lower income citizens that need these vehicles replaced. And obviously we've been at an impasse. So staff is suggesting, well, why don't we try to develop a win-win situation here? Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth have now accumulated $200 million in AirCheck Texas money. And to go back for you newer members, this is money when you pay $6. You're not driving a Volvo 240. You're driving a newer car. You pay $6. Your car doesn't go on a dyno. It's plugged in, and that $6 goes to the AirCheck Texas program. So why don't we modernize the program? Every year, obviously, there are newer cars, so the rate of revenue going into this bucket is increasing because there's more newer cars than older cars. Why don't we use some of this money to improve transportation, intersection improvements, or signal progression, or pedestrian bicycle facilities, or whatever it may be? You can decide what is eligible. And maybe 50% of the money should go to that. And then maybe 40 or 45% of the money should go to the traditional vehicle repair and replacement. And then 5% of the money, maybe, or 10, could go to the undercover activities. And the reason why that amount of money may go down is, remember, the state's going to a single sticker, and we're going to move from fraudulent safety inspection stickers to fraudulent vehicle registration stickers as part of that process. So there's an enforcement component that I think you should fund. I think there's a general transportation element you should probably fund, and there's the traditional repair and replacement that you should fund. And try not to have, well, this is all one way. Try to communicate, as we have been, why don't you develop a win-win program? Now, we seem to be making headway. Nichols is upset there's $200 million that can't go to better uses. Pickett is looking at this as an opportunity to, why are these funds being held to balance the budget when maybe the budget doesn't even have to be balanced by retaining these funds back? There seems to be a surplus. Well, maybe there's a win-win in all this. So Amanda will bring back to you the specifics of this three-legged stool, which I think, Commissioner, you're bringing up as part of the RTC strategy in the next program. Instead of just reaffirming the old program, see if there's a newer combination of things this body would be willing to support. Amanda's planning to bring that back to you in that detailed program.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? If not, this is an action item. I'll entertain a motion.
And that's the action, right, Amanda?
Nope. Here's the action. We're not doing the legislative program at this time. It's just for the...
Well, I have a motion by Rob Franke, a second by Glenn Whitley. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Michael, you're going to give us some good information on innovative revenues, financial backstop analysis, item number 8.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I believe Commissioner Eads asked for this item several months ago. We appreciate the opportunity to work on some other things before we worked on this to bring back to you. I think this is a fabulous report. It shows you the partnership that you've had. Let me walk through it in some detail. We purposely blue sheeted it for you, so it's item 8 at your place, so you don't have to take a lot of notes. Most of our focus is on risk. That was the specific question that you asked. I really don't want to get into too much of the mechanics of, how fast would that money be available and who does it go to again. We're more than happy to bring that back to you. But Ken and Christy have gone through a detailed evaluation. Ken would be given this. He's on vacation. But let me walk you through and focus on the risk part. Amanda, thank you for flipping my graphics for me. So we've divided all of the things you've done in the past, and this is all your existing projects, into 3 categories: managed lane revenue share projects, loan funding swap initiatives, and financial backstop projects. The first group, by definition, has no risk at all, and I'll show you why. The second group has small to moderate risk, and we'll show you which projects. And we think your financial backstop on 360 has low risk as part of that process. The amazing part is you're looking at, through your efforts, over the next 30 to 40 years, close to $2 billion in your own sweat equity in this region to help fund other transportation projects. And that's what I want to walk you through this particular item. So they're not all available tomorrow, but our legacy to the group behind us is putting in place some imaginative strategies to fund additional transportation. Now, I know you're not focused on the revenue side as much as the risk side, but it's hard to cover. I'm going to cover both of them as I move forward. So here's your managed lane projects. You have Interstate 30, which is Mr. Hale is finishing up from downtown Dallas to Arlington. That is scheduled to have about $240 million over the next 20 years. That's the latest financials we got from TxDOT. The DFW connector, those revenues have not been pledged to any other project. That's $350 million of revenue over the next 40 years. Interstate 35E, by resolution of this group, the money on 35E stays on 35E, and it is pledged to repay the TIFIA loan and help pay for other elements of the 35E project. State Highway 183, so I have not included any of the revenues here. They just stay dedicated to that project in my $2 billion estimate. State Highway 183, which is the Commission's most recent project in our region, I put 183 plus because it includes portions of 114 and portions of Loop 12. Those revenues are pledged to the TIFIA loan being pursued, but there's revenues that can help pay for additional portions of that particular corridor, and I have not included any of those revenues in my estimate. Here is that discussion Ms. Washington just had. We're in the final conversations on US 75 and 635. I call them interims versus toll express lanes, and they are currently under review because they're in the environmental process, and that's to fund two large projects, obviously LBJ East and US 75, so at some point in the future, revenues on those corridors may want to stay on those corridors since they're not funded, different than Interstate 30. That project will be complete when those first revenues start coming in. And I have not included any of those revenues in this $2 billion estimate as well. But there is no risk associated with them because there is no projects that are waiting with those funds. So what comes in as part of that process. If you remember, on your CDA projects, LBJ and the North Tarrant Express, we have a shared revenue band on those projects. So if the revenues come in higher than a band, those items come to the RTC. So I remind you there's revenue bands on the CDA projects. At this point, we think they're negligible, but you are protected if those revenues come in above certain levels, that they are not swept by the private sector, but come back to the public sector. Remember, on the LBJ, you're funding what we call the Y connection. So when you go northbound on Loop 12, right now you're forced to go eastbound on LBJ. We put in the connection to be able to go continue north on 35E. We think doubling the traffic on the express lanes on 35E. Those revenues are being negotiated. Randy Redmond from TxDOT is here. He's the lead person doing those negotiations. Those will be revenues that come back to the Regional Transportation Council. I have not added those revenues to this process. And then PGBT Eastern Extension, this is a negotiations Bill Hale did. It's a 20% gross revenue. The RTC funded the interchange at George Bush and Interstate 30 at a cost of $124.7 million. That came from revenues that were allocated to projects in Dallas County. But because that project couldn't be built without that interchange being constructed, those revenues, $365 million between now and 2035. The first $124.7 million pays back Dallas County. The rest of those revenues, of course, will be shared on the pro rata share of toll tag use in the whole region. And I have included the difference between these two numbers in my estimate of future revenue after we pay back Dallas County projects. The next is loan swapping out monies. We have interesting ways in this RTC to help each other get projects across the goal line. You purchased the NTTA SIB loan that was being paid to TxDOT to help TxDOT refund their state infrastructure bank. So $138.9 million You paid to buy that loan. I think Elizabeth has said 4 or 4.5%. The RTC will collect $65 million in interest, and Dallas County, Denton County, and Collin County are the loan holders because those are the RTR monies we used. And every year that payment is something like $8 to $10 million coming in between 2013 and 2029. The RTC owns the loan for the Fort Worth Burlington Northern. This is the movement of 156 and the Burlington Northern Main Line to extend the Alliance Airport runway, $51.3 million. There is some risk to this item. This risk does not sit with Denton County because the RTC is purchasing this risk. The money comes from FAA as eligible costs of moving the rail line for the purposes of the runway extension. If we continue on funding loan swap, the East loaned the West $30 million to do the 35W project. We will bring back to you in the next few months the resolution of this particular loan. So $20 million was borrowed from 183 and $9 million was borrowed from Loop 9. That is being resolved. We could have brought it back earlier. We're busy doing other things, so this loan will go away. We funded some pass-through projects. Pass-through, if you remember, was use local money to fund improvements on the state system, and the state will pay us back. So the state will pay us back $79.75 million. Those monies are already allocated to specific projects. $25 million is not. And John Barton and Bill Hale worked out a very nice project to fund the Interstate 30 project. So we're actually being reimbursed. Not only do you get the revenue from the Interstate 30 project, you're being reimbursed for the improvements that are currently out there because they were categorized as pass-through projects. So if you remember previous charts we showed you when 35E was being done, there's $25 million coming back from Interstate 30 to be spent somewhere in Dallas County as part of that process. Trinity Parkway Engineering, the RTC, in order to get the environmental documents done on the Trinity Parkway, you loaned to whoever builds the Trinity Parkway the engineering to be done. You all have a patch on your sleeve. You all know that a project has to be engineered about 30% in order to do an engineering environmental complete report. So about $30 million of the $85 million has been spent. The other $55 million is still sitting there, is unspent. Whoever does the Trinity Parkway will repay you for that money you have on that particular project. And then Denton County loaned to LBJ several years ago and has been paid back right-of-way needs we had in order to get LBJ done, and that's already been repaid. We kept it on this list just to remind you of that particular loan as part of that process. Financial backstop, here's your 360 project. We think this is a low risk, even though this is a big number. We're responsible for $466 million maintenance and $687 million in principal and interest for 360. TxDOT estimates, and we estimate, that the revenues far exceed that project, so revenues are coming in. Remember, 75% of those go to the west, 25% go to the east, and 50% of those monies go to the RTC and 50% go to NTTA. Why is this risk low? Two things we agreed to before the RTC would have step-in financial responsibilities. The toll rate could go up, and operations and maintenance could be reduced before RTC is asked to pay any shortfall on that particular project. Everyone I bump into from the financial world thinks 360 is going to do really, really well, and thinks maybe not just our estimate, but TxDOT estimate is going to be low on the 360 project. Other financial backstops, LBJ repayment. This is dollars that is already complete that went to the State Highway 183 project, and you can see these monies on the State Highway 183 project. And then in addition, LBJ has a $100 million contingency. We used $25 million to build the improvements in the interchange as part of the Y connection, and there's still $75 million in contingencies sitting on the LBJ project. So here's an assessment, RTC, of where your risks are. I believe in the first bucket there's none, because the revenues are what the revenues are. You have some swaps that so far are working out fine. I think the FAA one is the one of greatest risk. The other ones we're going to take off your books as we move forward, including the $30 million loan from the east to the west to get the Interstate 35W project done. And then you do have a financial risk on 360, but we've put in place 2 policy initiatives, 2 institutional things that can occur before step-in of RTC. And if you sum up those deltas, then those revenues don't sit here today, but over 20, 30, 40-year period, they produce revenues that this body will be able to look at to help fund other projects. And of course, there's rules with each one. The toll road projects that generate revenue have a toll allocation policy, and the RTC has policies on the tolled express lanes, what you wish to do with that, staying in the same county, and on projects that need money like LBJ and 75, you may wish that those monies be used to help pay for the permanent improvements in those particular quarters. But here's the risk assessment. It's purposely at 80,000 feet. We can drill down, Mr. Chairman, anywhere this committee wishes to go. We eventually will put together a financial allocation table so you all can see what these cash flows are over time and which counties it impacts as part of that particular process. I didn't want to overly complicate the request at this particular point in time. So staff will stop there, and we'll seek any questions or directions the RTC wishes to have.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Any questions?
I would just like to thank you, Michael, and your staff for all y'all's efforts on this document. It's great.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, very comprehensive. Okay, thank you, Michael. Item number 10, number 9. Jesse, you're going to give us Regional Vehicle for Hire Implementation Plan.
I think there's a segue in here somewhere from nuclear explosion, but I didn't have enough time to really work through it, so I'll bring that back. Excuse me. I'm here this afternoon to give a brief update on the Regional Vehicle for Hire program and our implementation efforts. When we started developing this program, we were focused on solving a relatively simple problem of connectivity. People who were using taxis to get to life-saving appointments like medical trips couldn't get picked up in some cities because of the way that taxis were regulated. So it turns out that the problem and the possible solutions really weren't that simple at all. So the cities, DFW International Airport, and the council governments began working collectively to develop a regional program to improve for-hire services for customers. Our goals are listed there. I won't read them all to you, but again, we started with the goal to ensure seamless service for customers and to make sure that within the region you could get some sort of service. So currently, each city is responsible for setting its own standards, issuing its own permits, doing its own inspections, and enforcement. So the main idea of the regional program is to streamline those functions to let taxis and limousines operate anywhere in the region they want to under the same rules with one permit. So under the proposed structure, there would be one set of standards. One entity would do the permitting and inspections for all the vehicles in the region, and each city would be responsible for doing its own enforcement. As I mentioned before, we've been working on this for some time. In 2010, we successfully tested the idea of one regional permit for limousines for the Super Bowl. In 2011 and 2012, we created a more formalized structure with DFW Airport taking the lead on permitting and inspections in the region. Last year, we focused mostly on developing the regional standards and working with cities over 200,000 in population to opt in first. And this year we focused primarily on integrating the emerging app technologies and the new service delivery models. Many of you have heard of companies like Uber or Lyft. That's what we're talking about here. And to do this, we've hired a consultant to look at the best practices from across the country. As we've been working to categorize existing and new public transportation services, our approach has been to look at the transportation system as a whole and to use service characteristics like scheduling, cost, or service area to group common services together. This is a partial table and it's only showing some of our efforts. The rows are the modes, the columns are the characteristics. I'm not going to go through all of this for you today, but the whole table is in your packet, electronic item number 9. There's some very important milestones coming up for us in the next 6 months, including finishing the regional ordinance, finalizing the financial model, completing the interlocal agreements, and our goal is to implement the program starting January, February of 2015. In 2015, it's our intention to move forward towards a conclusion. So we'll either finish developing our voluntary consensus position with the regional program, or cities will choose to continue the structure we have now, which is each city will implement whatever they wish to individually. So it's not our intention to implement a program that cities don't want to participate in. So we'll continue working to reconfirm our existing commitments over the next couple months just to make sure we're on the right track. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jesse. Bonsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. This is not a question, it's a comment in the mode of information. As many of you know, the City of Dallas has been working on this particular issue for several months. The issue came up in what we thought initially, as RTC thought initially, was a fairly simple model. When we got into it, it is not simple at all. The council authorized my committee, the Transportation Committee, to take on this task. And because I'm such a generous person, I appointed Councilmember Grayson to take on the work group. The work group included council members and stakeholders, the limousine and taxi owners, the app-based persons. Those are the stakeholders, and that's who the work group included. The work group did not include the public because I did not think that it was time to include the public, and I'm the person who took the responsibility for the composition of the work group. I did not ask anyone because the council had charged my committee with the task, and so I set up the work group the way I thought it should be set up. The work group, under the very, very able leadership of Ms. Grayson, spent several months and has now come to the point where there is a draft ordinance for the City of Dallas. The ordinance is approximately 107 pages long. We recently had a city council briefing on the ordinance. We are now in the process of the public comment period on our ordinance. The public comment period will close on August 29th. We will have a public forum on September the 2nd in the evening. Anyone who wishes to come and make comments will be able to do so. There will be no interaction with the council at that time. It's a Transportation Committee public forum. There will not be interaction. It is simply written comment period. And we have received already tremendous documentation. I've seen some of the documentation. My committee is not going to be happy with me, but they'll get to that point. After the public forum, the matter will go back to my Transportation Committee. There will be opportunity there for revisions, comments, etc. It will then go to the council for action sometime after September 17th. On September 17th, we have our budget adoption, and sometime after that, the mayor will put this on the agenda. The goal is for implementation by January 1st of 2015, with which dovetails with RTC goals for implementation. It is my hope that the Dallas ordinance and the regional ordinance can be coordinated, or that we can learn from each other and they be very, very similar. I do not know if that will happen. 4 members of our council are sitting here now. We are the 4, all 4 of us on the Transportation Committee. We're the 4 who are most immersed in this conversation, but there are 11 others who are not immersed in this conversation and have lots of other items and issues to deal with. And so that's why I say I do not know whether the City of Dallas will choose to coordinate its ordinance with the RTC's ordinance. If the City of Dallas will say we have no interest in that as a whole council. I did want you to be informed of what is going on. I invite you, as members of the region, to send to our city secretary any written comments that you may have during the during the written comment period, or if you wish to show up and have a public statement during the public forum, I will welcome that and give you the opportunity to speak. Mr. Chair, I would like to pass the microphone to Ms. Grayson in case she wants to add to something that I have said, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Ms. Grayson.
We've been working on this proposed ordinance for 6 months and have really gotten a remarkable degree of consensus. Now, there are a lot of outstanding issues, and we're still working on the ordinance all the time. Even the document that you see, which actually is 21 pages. The draft ordinance is 21 pages, which is the proposal that came out of my provider work group and the staff work group. It is a 50,000-foot level document, so we have a lot of detail to still go through, and we have a few outstanding issues, but we've really made a lot of progress on a really thorny issue, which I think Jesse might agree, it's hard to bring all those stakeholders to the table and get them in the same place. So
sometimes they won't come.
But they came, and we've made a lot of progress. And what we did was, just very, very quickly, the old ordinances siloed everything. We had an ordinance that covered taxis, and we had an ordinance that covered limos, and we had an ordinance that covered shuttles, and then you have your new app-based providers, the Ubers and the Lyfts and the others. So what we did was we stopped siloing all of that, and we just adopted certain regulations across the board related to insurance, vehicle checks, and driver background checks, and then we kind of had a free market approach to everything else. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to hear the public, and we're tweaking it all the time, but it's really a different kind of way of doing it, and so we're hoping everybody kind of looks at it with an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. Mayor, you said?
Monsieur, you addressed part of my question, which was I'm trying to figure out sort of a chicken or egg. I mean, if you guys pass your ordinance in November, I think that's fine. I just think that will end up meaning that the region goes to an ad hoc approach. I'm not criticizing that. I just think that seems like that's what's going to happen.
Mr. Mayor, I guarantee you of a moral certainty, we will not get to it being passed by November.
I also wanted to add that I think it's going to be difficult to get a decent regional approach if you have an opt-in, opt-out kind of approach. And I don't know how you could force cities to opt in, but it would be a patchwork quilt. And so I'm interested to see how you approach that and how you wind up resolving that.
Well, we started with the 80% rule. So if we could get the biggest cities and all the cities over 200,000 to participate, that'd be a good start. So that's where we started, knowing that there'll be some smaller cities that won't be interested, but that was the approach.
The one thing I just want to add, and I think it goes to the last slide Jesse has, we've had a great relationship with Judge Hill on this particular topic, and I believe in the same principle. we share our information with the committee, and the committee shares our information. It would be my hope we could come up with a regional program that has whatever, and we got Fort Worth and DFW International on the same page, and we have a regional program. That would be great, because I keep looking at that woman from Hearst who went to the Arlington cancer treatment and was delivered by a cab who couldn't take her back home because that cab isn't licensed in Arlington to take her back home. And that's our commitment. That's our face on this program. The point of this item today is to simply tell our partner cities, if whatever region, and I think this gets, Mayor, at your point, if whatever reason Dallas wishes to do a certain approach and Fort Worth wishes not to, and the airport may wish to do something else, I think it's okay to just say, okay, we're doing what we're doing. The RTC is not, I'm not going to ask the RTC to be in a position to dictate to our local governments on this particular topic, because the RTC has no real jurisdiction on this particular topic. We're doing it really as a technical assistance and at the request of several of the cab companies to try to do this. But if we don't get to a consensus, I just wanted you to know early, we are going to step back, and our local governments will continue to be the implementers of this particular program. I see no path forward in my mind that would in any way would be confrontational with our local governments on this topic. We really went into this as a technical capability and using our communication skills to gain consensus. We think all the cities are going to opt in. Cities are asking us, can we opt in without having to pay anything? Yeah, we're not even going to charge you if you opt into the regional program. But the Dallas approach is a very different approach. This market-based approach is something Fort Worth may or may not accept, and maybe it's something the airport may or may not accept. We keep iterating with all of our partners and have been for a long time. So the good news is I think this is coming to a point, and whatever it is, we're happy that we've had an opportunity to participate in it. I still think there's an opportunity to come to terms, and we owe the city a briefing on where at least the regional approach is right now, and you can be critical of some of our elements. But I do ask you to all look at that detailed table to show you how complicated this is. About 6 months ago, we took a step backwards and actually said, wait a minute, we need to study transportation here, because this technology is coming so fast that if you don't have a home for technology, which our approach does, as a home for all technology and all options, you almost have to redefine, well, what is a transit vehicle and what is a... So please look at that detailed table. Jesse showed you a summary. All transportation fits on that table. It's in a much bigger form. And it really speaks to where do you have to regulate or not regulate industry. And that's, I think, the roadmap for how we move forward. So we're blessed to be able to be in a position to sort of help in this. Anyone who thinks this is an easy subject, this subject is 20 times more complicated than anything else we've done in transportation. We wouldn't be at it for 5 years if it wasn't complicated. And the good news is we're going to either come to a consensus and move forward, or we're just going to step aside and let the parties proceed what is in their best interest. There's no reason to have lots of concern with regard to that. And I just wanted to get to the RTC early on this, so RTC members aren't. But Fort Worth needs to review Dallas's approach, and Dallas needs to hear what the regional committee did, and let's continue to try to develop a win-win. If we can, great. If not, I think it's okay, but our staff has to work on other things other than taxis after January or so. And I know we're going to bring in our policy committee and some other things, and I know all the lawyers from all the cities are working on ordinances, and it's a lot of hard work, and I really appreciate everyone's effort, and I really appreciate the engagement of the city on this topic. City of Dallas, it is a lot of their time for all of you to be spending on this particular topic, and it is a very important topic to be spending time on. But thank you.
Sheffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, for one, would like to see RTC stay involved. I would like to see a regional plan come from out of what we're doing. So I would really like to see you there, Michael, at these meetings, if that's okay, and maybe put some input and maybe help guide us to where you see it could be a regional plan, and everybody could tag on and say, this is good, that's what we want, because I'd really like to see it all over, not just in Dallas. And that's what we need to have, everybody in connection. So hopefully you'll be there.
Well, we
during
got
our, or have staff there.
Well, we just wrote down the dates and times, so we'll get with
Okay.
Kim on the calendar and see what we can do.
Thank you.
And I don't even begin, because from the county's perspective, we're not really in this, but just as you were talking, I looked, and Uber and Lyft each have 3 cars in the area that can pick me up in 5 minutes.
Let's call them.
And I don't know exactly how.
I'm sorry.
That's good,
Sorry,
Cantrell, that's good.
But can they bring you home?
Well, depending on where community, I guess it's also dependent upon where they drop off, so. But I think that Uber, so the fact that you have the app base in there also is, I think, very important, because I'm finding that more and more in any city I go into. At least Uber's there and Lyft too, I think, in most instances.
Y'all done?
One approach to assist in the collaboration of Dallas and RTC may be for the RTC Executive Committee to send us a statement during this comment period, because there won't be time to get one from the RTC generally. The comment period is going to close on August 29th. Perhaps if the Executive Committee could send us a statement, something along the lines of, we really would hope that Dallas will consider the fact that there is a regional ordinance being considered, and Dallas may want to look at some of the regional components. That may be an appropriate statement to include in the Dallas comment booklet.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I served on this committee, and my goodness, it's mind-boggling. Hats off to you, Sandy, for what you've done. But what I do not want to see is every single city trying to pull together all of those same stakeholders to go over what they've already told the city of Dallas. And I think Jesse said it, but Ms. Grayson confirmed. She said, well, you can't get them in the same room, Ms. Grayson. They came in the same room with me. But I'm telling you, if 35 other municipalities want them to come in the room, those folk ain't going to come to no 35 other meetings. So to the point, I would hope that we could do something from a regional perspective. And this thing is much bigger than any of us thought it would be. We thought we would have this resolved 3 years ago. It was a simple operation. And then when we started peeling back the onion, my God, did it smell. Thanks much.
Thank you, Bernice. Okay, thank you, Jesse. Well, Ms.
I just
Grayson.
wanted to comment that Bernice and others, we've had 3 or 4 meetings with DFW Airport already on this, so that they're getting comfortable with this. They still have a couple of outstanding issues which we're working on, but we have tried to talk to a lot of the stakeholders that depend on this industry. The hospitality industry is very interested in the outcome of this. So I just wanted you to know, Bernice, that we've talked to the airport quite a bit about this, because it has to work for them.
Great, thank you. All right, item number 10, Chad, Metropolitan Transportation Plan Amendment.
Hey, before we get to that, sorry,
Judge?
Mayor, Commissioner, we got 2 questions. I agree with everybody in the room here about the question of working together on the regulation, and I think that's good. I'm sorry I'm late. I waited like an hour and a half on a taxi. My car wouldn't start. Luckily, I got Uber. They brought me right over. I'm kidding, but there is another component to this regulation that we need to keep in mind. I just left a lunch with Donna Nelson, who's the chair of the PUC, and she was telling me something interesting in that lunch, that the last regulated utility rate in the state was 9.7 cents, which adjusted for inflation is right at 13 cents a kilowatt hour today. The average for a homeowner in Dallas today is 8.7 cents. So as we think about these regulations, regional I think is better than city to city. But as we think about regulations, the less regulation that we have, we need to make sure that the common carriers are serving all of our citizens and are not, rate coding and are not ignoring areas of town. But the less regulation that we have, you just see it over and over again. There was a story on one of the TVs the other day about one of the reasons why Aldrich Ames became a traitor and sold secrets on the CIA. And one of the reasons he gave is his wife's phone bill to Columbia to talk to her mother was $1,500 a month, right? So think back to when you had tight regulations on phones and electricity. We've got an opportunity with this to really lead the nation and be transformative and save our taxpayers a ton of money when they use these services. And if we make these services available and we get people who've been maybe overserved not to use their cars as much, there's a real public safety benefit too. So this is really important that we get this, not only that we do it in a regional way with Dallas leading, but that we get it right and we don't over-regulate these folks into false profit margins, with a bunch of regulations that we don't need. So, and I'm not saying that we've got any of those in there. I'm just saying that as we move forward, we need to be mindful of that. Because I see two ways to fall off the plank. One is we fail to do it, and the other is we do it in such a way that we stifle competition and we inflate charges.
Great, thank you, Judge. Chad?
Good afternoon. At last month's RTC meeting, I had provided an information item regarding the Mobility 2035-2014 amendment, which I noted as a strategic amendment being proposed by staff for the current Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. This amendment will allow projects which need clearance in the short term before Mobility 2040's adoption to move towards approval and implementation. I noted last time that we'd begun coordinating with our regional transportation partners, and since that time we've had several meetings with our partners, including TxDOT, NTTA, and transit authorities, and we've developed a draft list of projects for inclusion that I'll be sharing with you today. We also communicated to our partners that July 25th was the deadline for any project submittal seeking a change to be included in the 2014 amendment. We split our list of draft projects into two categories. First, those projects that have a significant change in them from the previous MTP. Those projects are on the screen now, and this includes new projects which are shown in orange, or projects which are in the current plan but have changed their design concept and scope, which are shown in purple. There's just 7 of these, so I'm just going to go through them really briefly. The first project, Project 1 there, involves the widening of the SH-114 freeway in Trophy Club. The second project is on 121 from the northern end of DFW Airport and the DFW connector to the Sam Rayburn Tollway, and that just involves a modification of the type and number of lanes in that project. The third project is the Blacklands Corridor, where a feasibility study in this corridor has been undertaken by the Council of Governments to determine if there needs to be an MTP recommendation in this corridor, which we are now recommending. Fourth project is similar to the second one, and it's just, again, modifying the number and types of lanes on that project, which had already been in the plan. Project 5 is the Tiger funding submittal for the Dallas streetcar, and this would extend the project that's under construction now for the streetcar. This would extend the streetcar further into the CBD. And the sixth project is on Loop 9, where we've been advised by TxDOT that by the year 2035, the tolled main lanes for most of that corridor would not be warranted. And so we're including this now as a staged toll road and maintaining most of the frontage roads in the corridor. And finally, the seventh project involves a widening of Interstate Highway 35E from the southern end of Waxahachie to the MPA boundary at Hill County. So in addition to these major projects, we also identified a number of projects which are more minor in nature or have a change in staging, typically just a change in the year that they will be built. Also included on this list are some grade separations and other bottleneck improvements. Since these projects do not involve a major change at the level of MTP documentation or would appear in some of the presentation maps and whatnot that you see around here. I won't go over them individually because we have quite a few of them here, but you can see in general the ones in blue are those corridors that were in the plan and now just have some sort of a staging change, and the green dots are the enhanced interchanges or the grade separation locations. Updating you on our schedule again. Again, this is the second information item that we've had for our TC. And we wanted to give you a look at this draft list before we bring a final list for information at the next meeting. And following that, we will we'll have public meetings in September, followed by STEC action items scheduled in September, and then coming back to the RTC for an action item scheduled in October. And again, as I mentioned last time, once this amendment is adopted, we'll begin work on the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Mobility 2040, with an adoption of that expected in late 2015 or early 2016. And as opposed to this expedited amendment, Mobility 2040 will involve a more thorough review of all the projects and programs and policies in the MTP. It will employ new regional demographics. We will undertake a new financial forecast and include any new planning requirements that come about due to legislation or related rulemaking. I have contact information for our MTP team, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Chad. Any questions? Seeing none. We're going to delay the other two items, 11 and 12, when we have more time at the next event, and then let's see, next meeting September the 11th at 1 o'clock, and don't forget the Texas Transportation Commission meeting that's blue sheeted. We are adjourned. Thank you.